Hi, what's good, y'all? It's Jeremiah here. And in this video, I'm gonna be giving out my grades for each team based on how their offseason went. I split this up by division. So we'll start with the Eastern Conference first, and work our way to the Western Conference. Yeah, man, let's just get right into it. First up, I have the Boston Celtics, the hometown team. They were the second seed last year, finished with a 51-31 record. They made it to the finals and lost to Golden State in 6 games. As far as the offseason goes, it was obviously pretty rough. You got the Ime Udoka suspension for the season. Joe Mazzulla is going to step in and be the interim head coach. The only thing that I'm going to say, or I'm just going to talk about as far as this Ime situation goes, because we've talked about this enough, and, I'm even tired of talking about it, but, for the purpose of this video, just to share a little bit of my thoughts. All I'm going to say is I think it's going to have a negative effect to start the season. I don't know how long that effect is going to linger into the season and how dramatic it's going to be. But all I know is when you take out a coach that, well, what I'll say is like before Ime showed up, this team had the reputation of being soft. When push came to shove, it was, us questioning whether they were ready to, step up to the plate and accept those challenges, especially from like a physical standpoint as well as a mental standpoint. And when Ime came in, he just completely changed that narrative in a way that I've never really seen a coach just completely, you know, flip a switch within a team like this. And it took a few months too, because the first 2 months of the season, honestly, it didn't look great. And it was like, yo, does this guy really understand this team? Like, are they understanding him? And then you just saw it. It really took off after the All-Star break, but even a little bit before that, you just started to see these guys, carry themselves, with more confidence, with more, even a little more arrogance. And I think that was a reflection of Ime and how he was able to just sort of get a grasp of the team, understand the pulse, understand guys, and putting them in the best possible position. And he honestly just he got that dog out of them, which you take away that and the essence that he brought, like that's for sure going to have a negative impact on them. I don't think it's going to drastically affect the season. Like I still think this team is going to be really good. I still think they're going to win a lot of games if they stay healthy. That's another thing I'm going to talk about. But you take away a special coach like that really understood these guys on so many different levels and was able to just bring out a tenacity that we haven't seen in the past. Losing that is tough, and we'll see how Joe does as the interim head coach. This is obviously his first time in a capacity like this, so that in itself is going to be an adjustment. But losing Ime, that's not an easy loss right there. That guy was really good at his job. But as far as transactions goes, we traded for Malcolm Brogdon, who has a year left on his deal at 22 million. Gallinari, we signed him in free agency. He ended up tearing his ACL in the FIBA World Cup, so we're probably not going to see him to the playoffs. But this is the one that's really, really tough. After the Ime suspension, I think this is probably the second worst thing that happened to them, and that's losing Rob for the first 8 to 12 weeks due to knee surgery. And this is the same knee that was bothering him that he played through the finals. And when you hear him talk about it, he says, he played at age 24. He was able to play in the NBA finals. He has no regrets. And I love him for thugging it out and fighting through that injury. But, this is sort of the cost that comes with that. So he's going to be out to start the season. They say 8 to 12 weeks. I won't be surprised if it's longer just because, just wanted to be cautious with him and making sure he's really right for when it matters. But losing him to start the season, that's a tough blow. They drafted J.D. Davidson with the 53rd pick. I don't have too much thoughts on him because I didn't really know what he was about in college. He had some flashes in summer league, but I don't think we're gonna see too much of him. And if we are, that probably means that guys are injured, and that's it's just not a good thing. So JD 53rd pick. I think that's more of a down the line project. Things to watch out for this season. I have Jaylen Brown trade rumors as my first thing that I'm watching out for. And obviously, so I made this earlier on in the summer. And at the time when I was working on the Celtics, that was when the whole KD situation was going on and Jalen's name was being thrown in the trade discussions. And the reason I'm still gonna monitor this situation a little bit is because, well, for one, he has 2 years left on his deal. So, and he actually, I think he was eligible for an extension this past summer, and we didn't extend him. And I think that's partly on Jalen's, like part of the reason why we didn't extend him is because Jalen and his agent is probably thinking, yo, we could just make way more money in 2 years, which is, that's the smart thing to do. Jalen's a smart guy. Guy knows how to make his money, but also with 2 years left on his deal, there's no long-term commitment in ink as of right now. And if your name is constantly being thrown in trade rumors every time a name pops up, whether it was KD this past summer or Paul George in the past, when Kawhi was available, Jalen's name was being thrown in there. I think when Anthony Davis was available, his name, Jalen's, was the first name that came up. Like, when your name is just always being thrown in trade rumors, just from like the human element of it, I just wonder if I'm like trying to look into Jalen's mind here. I just wonder how much, or like if that's even a thing that he just, sort of just bookmarks in the back of his head, like, yo, y'all are always trying to trade me. This is a guy who's done nothing but get better each season. There was moments last year, especially in the playoffs, where he looked like our best player. And I don't know. I don't think Jalen's the kind of guy where he lets the outside noise and trade rumors. I mean, it's just evident just on how he's improved each year. He's not the kind of guy that lets that affect his play on the court. But this year it was pretty dramatic with the KD thing, especially after making the finals and it being his best year. And just a few months later, his name is just like, the headline of a potential KD trade. I wonder if I'm Jalen, if I'm thinking, or if I'm having question marks at least as to the long-term commitment that I may want to, if I won't even want to have long-term commitments to this team. So that's something I'm monitoring a little bit, not too concerned about it, but just a little bit of a watch fly on that. Something that I actually gonna be monitoring way more is Al Horford being 36 years old. And I say that because last year we asked a lot out of Al on both sides of the ball, but especially defensively, where I remember in that Miami series in the playoffs, this guy was picking up Bam full court. This dude was switching everything, flying around. Like, I was actually on demon time defensively last year. And to ask of him to compete at that same level and give you that, that same production and intensity at age 36, I think that's asking for a lot, man. And I know he's a guy you want in the locker room. I'm so happy we brought him back. Like, he's been great. I think he's also part of the reason why these guys were able to, sort of grow up, just bringing him back and just seeing how he carries himself as a professional. I think Tatum and Brown and Smart, I think they, followed suit when just, watching Al carry himself. But man, it's to ask that same level of production from him this season, especially with the front court being as thin as it is to start the season with Rob being out, it's asking for a lot, man. So I'm gonna see how that goes. And then the last thing I had was Sam Hauser buzz. I mean, this guy apparently can't miss during the preseason. He's probably gonna play too, considering how thin we are to start the season. So that's a guy to watch out for. Some stats that I wanted to throw at y'all. This is per cleaning the glass. Lineup of Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Al Horford, and Rob Williams were allowing 94.8 points per 100 possessions, which was top of the league. You bring in Brogdon, so that allows them to still play small, but then keep the switch everything mantra that, just really exemplifies how good this team could be defensively when they're able to switch everything. I think that's when they're at their best. So you bringing in Brogdon, they can keep that identity. And then on the offensive end, that's just another guy who can handle the ball. We even saw some lineups in the preseason of, I think it was Brogdon, Smart, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, and Jason Tatum, where it's like, man, that's really small, but they look kind of potent. I'm not going to lie. So I'll keep an eye on that lineup. We'll see how much Joe uses that. Another stat that popped out to me when doing some research on the Celtics So in the 2020 season, Jason and Jalen were getting fouled on 9.6% of their shot attempts. And that went up to above 11% for both of them last year. And that's really encouraging because that tells me that they're being more aggressive. They're getting to the basket more. I know with Tatum, that was really a big thing with us Celtics fans. Like, yo, why are you not driving more? Why are you not being aggressive enough? I think he sort of put that to bed a little bit last season. Just, the numbers prove it, and the eye test also proves that. So that's encouraging. I like that. I want to see that continue to go up for both of them. Uh, One thing that I want Jalen, and I hope he's worked on this during the offseason, is not turning the ball over as much. Because last year, he turned the ball over on 12% of his possessions, which was in the bottom 28th percentile. That's also per cleaning the glass. And he just has to be better with the ball in his hands, because if he's able to take care of the ball more, that's less lost possessions. And when you're as talented as the Celtics are on the offensive end, the less lost possessions probably means the more chance that you're going to score. And if he's turning the ball over less, that's just going to bode well for them. So Jalen, I want to see improvement on that end. But yeah, overall, with all that being said, I'll give the Celtics a solid B, because I like the Brogdon signing. I know he has his question marks as far as injuries goes, but I think he's going to, as long as he stays healthy, he's going to be really good for them on both ends. I mean, if had Ime not got suspended and Gallinari not tore his ACL in the Rob knee surgery situation, like had all that not happened, this team probably would have like an A, honestly, as far as offseason grades goes. But it can't be perfect. We know how the NBA is, man. It's very wishy-washy. Things can switch dramatically in the blink of an eye. So I think a B is a fair grade for the Celtics. And I don't know. I'm still excited to see how they do this year. I think they're going to be really good. So we can move on from them. We have the Brooklyn Nets next. They last year finished as the 7th seed with a 44-38 record. They were swept in the first round by Boston. It's another team that had a wild offseason. And it really started with Kyrie having to opt into the last year of his deal because Brooklyn wasn't willing to commit to him long term, which you can kind of see it from Brooklyn's point of view, where this guy hasn't really been available for you the past 3 seasons as far as postseason goes. And, to have to commit to a 4 or 5 year deal, whatever he was asking for, especially after the way last season went, like, I don't blame Brooklyn for holding off on that. I think even Kyrie understands that. So I think we're going to see determined Kyrie this year, especially because he's basically playing for a max contract. So that's something to look out for. Obviously, the KD situation with him requesting the trade and then requesting for Nash and Sean Marks to get fired, but then meeting with the brain trust and all that going to rest for now, or getting swept under the rug. We're gonna see if that doesn't come back up, if they start off rocky. But for now, it seems as if that situation is smoothed out. As far as transactions goes, they signed TJ Warren in free agency. That's just a flyer because he's coming off an injury at 1 year, 2.6 mil. He won't be healthy to start the season. I know that, but if he comes back and if he's even like 60% of what he was in the bubble, that's a big W for Brooklyn. A signing that I really, really liked though was them getting Royce O'Neal. They got him in a trade with Utah. He has 2 years left on his deal at 18.7 mil. And if you watch some of the preseason games for Brooklyn, you know right away that Royce is going to be a perfect fit for this team. Like, you can already see Kyrie and KD just love playing with him. Perfect guy because he's a 3-and-D, can knock down the shot. He has size. And I'm going to emphasize size when I talk about Brooklyn, because that's really what they lacked last year. It was size. It was having to throw out Patty Mills and Goran Dragic and Seth Curry for 35 plus minutes in that Boston playoff series. That's just Tatum and Brown. They get that on a switch. That's food. But now, you plug in a Royce O'Neal, a Markieff Morris, who they signed in free agency. That says 1 year, $2. That's definitely not the case. I think it was 2 mil. But even a guy like Edmund Summer, who they signed in free agency as well, like, they bulked up in size on the perimeter, and I think that's going to be really important for them. They lose Bruce Brown in free agency to Denver. That's going to be a little bit of a blow because he was a real glue guy for them. And he was an important part to that offense, believe it or not. So losing him is going to be tough. Losing Dragic and Drummond won't be as tough, but that's just some notable departures that they had to deal with. Things that I'm going to monitor this season with Brooklyn is honestly whether Nash goes with Rolls Royce, which is the nickname that Royce O'Neal has got himself in Brooklyn, or Joe Harris. Joe Harris, by the way, he missed basically all of last year with an ankle injury, had surgery in the offseason, and now there's apparently some pain that he's dealing with in the same foot that he had the ankle surgery on. So if you're a Brooklyn fan, that's a little bit concerning considering how much time he's already missed and all the, he basically had the whole summer to rehab, and for this to still be an issue, it's a little bit concerning, but this is the luxury that having Royce O'Neal brings you because he can kind of do what Joe does on the offensive end as far as stretching the floor. He's not as lethal of a shooter as Joe, but he could still knock that shot down. And then defensively, I think pretty, significantly better defender than Joe Harris is on the defensive end. So I want to see when it's crunch time and both guys are healthy, who Nash rolls with for that last spot. And then of course the elephant in the room, Ben Simmons. I mean, this guy is obviously the biggest X factor on this team, probably one of the biggest X factors in the season. Now we've seen him in the preseason, and even that's been up and down. He had the game against Miami where he was not looking to shoot at all. But then again, I'm filming this on Thursday, October 13th. Last night they played Milwaukee in the preseason, and it was everything you wanted to see from Ben Simmons. Like, he was guarding Giannis, held Giannis to 6 for 14 shooting. He was flying up and down the court. He was being aggressive. He was not afraid to get fouled. He still was missing his free throws, and that's just something he's just going to have to work on. But if he's going to keep the aggression, then that's really encouraging. And that's really what you want from him. Because defensively, the guy's special. He's a defensive player of the year candidate when healthy. He's probably one of the best defenders in the league, period. So you have a guy like that, another guy that brings you size for Brooklyn. Like, if we just he doesn't even have to be the best, like if he's just the 2021 version of Ben Simmons, that is going to bode really well for Brooklyn because, I mean, the guy's special. As polarizing as he is and as controversial as he is, when his head is right and his body's right and he's locked in, he's a special player. So obviously he's the biggest thing to monitor for if you're a Brooklyn fan. As far as grading goes, I'm gonna give them a B plus because I like them getting bigger on the perimeter. I think the team is probably gonna rely on their defense more so than their offense, believe it or not, which is crazy to think about with this team. But in that game against Milwaukee, and I get it was just preseason, but they were playing so hard defensively, and it was just leading to easy baskets and transition on the offensive end. So, and you add guys like Royce, Ben Simmons, Claxton getting bigger, eventually TJ Warren. Like, they're going to be really good defensively. So I'm going to give them a B plus based on how everything goes. Again, with this team, though, that can easily change in the blink of an eye. Like, they can easily become an F by fucking November. Katie they start off 5-15, and Katie's asking for a trade again, and Kyrie's checked out. Ben doesn't want anything to do with the core. Like, all of that is very possible and within the realm of possibility with this team. But as of right now, it's good vibes for them. I'm gonna give them a B plus. We can move on to the New York Knicks. They finished with a 37-45 record last year, the 11th seed. They signed Jalen Brunson in the offseason, 4 years, 104 mil. They just had money. They had to spend it on someone, and he was the guy that was available. He's obviously not a needle mover, but he's a good player, and I think he's gonna. I don't think New York is gonna be as bad as people think. They re-signed Mitchell Robinson, 4 years, 60 mil. Isaiah Hartenstein, who I really like, they signed him on a 2-year deal for 16 mil. Jericho Sims, that young athletic center that they have, they re-signed him on a 3-year deal for 5.6 mil. They bowed a farewell to Kemba, Alec Burks, Nerlens Noel, and Taj Gibson, guys that I don't think they're really gonna miss. Things that I'm really gonna watch out for is the leap for RJ Barrett, Obi Toppin, and Emmanuel quickly, but I really want to focus on RJ here. And I have some stats for RJ. I also had written down, will they trade for a superstar? This was, again, I was working on this throughout the summer. This was before Mitchell got traded and all the chaos that happened this offseason, but they're not going to trade for a superstar. This is going to be the roster that they have now. It's most likely going to be the one that they roll with, so we can disregard that. But back to RJ Barrett. First of all, he's only 21 years old still. The kid is really young, but he's fresh off of averaging 26 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists. And you see the 3 assists and immediately you think, man, that's pretty bad for a guy that has the ball in his hands that much. But I will say, and Knicks fans can attest to this, there were a lot of times where he was making some really nice passes to the weak side after initiating and driving, and guys were just bricking shots. Like dudes like Fournier, Kemba Walker, Alec Burks, like they were just missing these beautiful passes that Archie was setting up for them. So that 3 assists, I wouldn't lean too much into that as far as, or it being a concern for him as a playmaker, because I think like just watching him, he has the ability to be a pretty good playmaker and the lead guy as far as initiating an offense goes. One thing he does need to improve on though is finishing at the basket. Now these stats are per second spectrum, and he at the basket he shot 54.9% on a minimum of 200 field goal attempts, and that was second worst in the league behind LaMelo. And that just has to be better if you're RJ, because like I talked about, if guys are not going to hit their shots, you're going to have to take things into your own hands sometimes and continue to take a few more dribbles and maybe not make that pass to the corner, but have to finish over taller guys and through contact. And that just has to be better for him. That 55% being second worst in the league, for guys that shot a minimum of 200 field goals at the basket, that has to be better. Other than that, though, I thought the Knicks had a pretty solid offseason. I will give them a B as well. Maybe a B minus, because they didn't get the big splash that they were hoping for, but they also didn't catapult in the offseason. Like Hartenstein's gonna play, Brunson's really good, Jericho Sims is pretty good. Like they got some guys. They're gonna be. I could see them making the plan, so I'll give them a B minus, and that could obviously go up depending on how the season goes for them. Next, we have the Toronto Raptors. They were the 5th seed last year. They finished with a 48-34 record. They lost to Philly in the first round in 6 games. Moves that they made in the offseason, they signed Otto Porter Jr. in free agency on a 2-year deal at $12.3 million. They extended Thad Young for 2 more years at $16.3 million. Chris Boucher, they re-signed 3 years, $35.2 million. They drafted Christian Koloko, who just, when you look at him, he's just a typical Toronto Raptor. Just Masai just has this vision of eventually throwing out a bunch of 6'9" guys with ridiculous wingspans that can switch and handle the ball. He fits that mold. They drafted him with the 33rd pick. Things that I'm going to monitor this year with them is the year 2 leap for Scotty, and what is Precious' ceiling. And I mentioned Precious. Well, all right. Well, first let's start with some stats. So they were still top 10 in defense, but they actually regressed a little bit from the last few years, and this is per Cleaning the Glass. Opponent field goal percentage was top 5 worst from 2017 to 2020. They were holding teams at around 50%. But that dropped to outside the top 17 in the last 2 years, where teams are now shooting around 54% against them. So that's something that you want to see if you're a Toronto fan, kind of get back up into that top 5, top 10 range. As far as for the individual players, Scotty has already shown that he can be special on both sides, and he made real strides offensively post All-Star break. Nick Nurse kind of just threw the ball in his hands and told him, just run point Scotty, and he was like, fuck it, I'm up to the challenge, and he showed some signs. This is per second spectrum. When Scotty was the ball handler in pick and roll situations, the Raptors had a score frequency of 55.4%, which was in the 94th percentile. And that is a really small sample size. This is barely at 1 possession per game, but kind of shows you that when Scotty has the ball in his hands, good things can happen. And Precious, I just threw him in there because he was almost a 40% he almost shot 40% from the three last year. And this was a guy who Miami traded, which, at the time, he was sort of just this rim runner center that just can, play really good defense for you. But he has legitimately turned into a stretch five now. And that he's still really young. I think he's 23 years old. So, I just had to write that down what his ceiling could be, because just that shot improvement alone is something worth paying attention to. Toronto, it wasn't a crazy offseason, but I like the Otto Porter Jr. signing. I like them drafting Koloko. I'll give them this is another B. I think they're a solid B. I think they're going to be pretty good during the regular season. They're going to win a lot of games. They're going to compete. Siakam talking about he want to be top 10. We'll see, but this is going to be a good team, man. Nick Nurse, he's going to have those guys ready. Scotty's going to be better. They're just going to compete. They're not going to make life easy for their opponents. So I think a B for their offseason is fair. Next, we have the Philadelphia 76ers. They were the 4th seed last year, finished with a 51-31 record. They lost to Miami in the second round in 6 games. Moves that they made this offseason, they re-signed James Harden to a 2-year deal worth $68 million. He actually took a little bit of a pay cut there. And that allowed them to sign PJ Tucker in free agency for 3 years at $33 million. D'Anthony Melton, who they traded Danny Green for to the Grizzlies. He has 2 years left on his deal at $16.2 million. I really like that move, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. Daniel House Jr., they signed in free agency, so they're kind of just bringing back all the old Rockets for James Harden, it looks like. Plus, you just have Joel Embiid, who's just a monster. But they brought in Daniel House in free agency for 2 years at $8.4 million. They shipped out Danny Green, like I mentioned, in the trade with Memphis. He tore his ACL, so we won't see him this year. And DeAndre Jordan, they just let go. Things that I'm going to monitor: in shape James Harden. I mean, what did he say? Did he say he lost 30 pounds in the offseason, or was it 50 pounds? I don't know. But he does look good. I'm not going to lie. He looks slimmer. He looks more toned. As far as like getting the Houston James Harden, like we should just like that ship has sailed. We're not seeing that. But if he is, if he's able to just have a little bit more bounce in his step, and that will lead to defenses collapsing and having guys like Melton, PJ Tucker, House, and Maxey to play off of. And then of course him and Joel Embiid 1-2-man game, which was really special. I'll throw a stat at you guys in a little bit. But if Harden is really gonna, if he's actually in better condition, and if last year was just this long hamstring injury, which apparently it might have been, that could be positive for Philly. That could be something to look forward to, an in shape James Harden. I also had Tyrese Maxey, him taking another leap. I mean, that guy in the playoffs last year was really good. Defensively, it's not great with him. I hope that improves, because he's young and he's athletic. So it's like you don't really have too much of an excuse to not be that good defensively. And he's going to need it, because a backcourt of him and James Harden, they just can't afford to be bad defensively, especially when it comes to playoff time. So offensively, I think he's going to take another leap. Defensively is what I'm really going to pay attention to with him. I mentioned the D'Anthony Melton signing and why I loved it. So he's another guy, first of all, who could handle the ball. And he shot above 38% from 3 the last 2 seasons. And when you have Harden and Embiid and pick and roll and a guy like that in the corner, that's a nice plus. And this I found, according to Court Optics, Harden and Embiid in the pick and roll, I mean, this is ridiculous. They were scoring at 1.2 points per possession, which was just way far and beyond anyone else in the league. So you bring in an in-shape James Harden, Joel Embiid is probably going to be even a little bit better, and you put those 2 guys in the pick and roll, which I think Doc is going to lean more into this season. I think that's going to be deadly offense. Philly's going to be really good this year. I like the moves they made. There's good positivity and good vibes coming out of the camp so far. So I'm gonna give them an A minus. That might be a little high, but I don't know. I like the PJ Tucker signing. He just brings a sort of tenacity that they might have even lacked a little bit last year, especially in that Miami series. Funny enough, he was on the Heat in that series. I already mentioned why I love the Melton signing, Daniel House Jr. I just like the whole, Daryl Morey trying to recreate the Houston Rockets around James Harden, but You also have Joel Embiid now, and then you have Maxey, who's just, young budding potential all-star. I think Philly's going to be really good this year. So I got them as an A- for my offseason grade. We can move on to the Central Division. We're going to start off with the Milwaukee Bucks. They were the third seed last year. They finished with a 51-31 record. They lost to Boston in the second round in 7 games, and that was just an absolute battle. I mean, having to go against Giannis in that series was just, I mean, it was crazy. That guy's something else. But as far as the offseason goes, they signed Joe Ingles in free agency, 1 year, 6.4 mil. I like that. They drafted Major Beauchamp. You got the meme of him crying. Just interesting looking guy. But they took him with the 24th pick. They re-signed Javon Carter, who I like, 2 years, 4.3 mil. I wish Brooklyn could have kept him. They re-signed Pat Connaughton, 3 years, 28 mil. They re-signed Wesley Matthews, 1 year, 2.8. They kept Bobby Portis, 4 years, 49 mil. He got a nice little bag, and deservedly so. And they kept Serge Ibaka on a 1-year deal worth 2.9. They're basically the same team as last year, so I don't have too much to really talk about. What I will say is some stats I found on them is there was a drop off defensively, similar to Toronto, but with them it was a little bit more glaring. They were 14th in defensive rating last season, and they were 9th in 2021. And then in 2020, they were first. So they went from first to 9th to 14th. And that's a little bit odd because you have Giannis, who's just this, basically walking top 5 defense with his ability to just fly up and down the court, guard a guy in the corner, then rotate and just, block a shot. But I think the reason that defense slipped is because they're leaning more, at least they're just, they're invested more on the offensive end. And that might not be true, but just what the numbers tell me, they were 8th in offense in 2019. Then they were 5th in offense in 2020. And then they were 3rd in offense last season. And you see those, those two trends going in opposite directions. And I think that's just a correlation of Giannis's improvement offensively. Like, they're still pretty good defensively. 14th, you want to be a little better, especially when you have a guy like Drew Holiday. But I just think, when you're just, sort of focusing more on the offensive end, it's just, you're more likely to regress a little bit defensively. And I think that's what we saw with Milwaukee, but they're going to be really good. Middleton is back, and, not having him in the Boston series was obviously tough because that's, at times their second best guy. So they kept the same team pretty much. Nothing new, nothing major happened. I'm going to give them a solid B for that because I think it was a really good team already. And the fact that they were able to keep all those guys, adding Joe Ingles, I guess, was, the little splash that they made. I think a B is fair for Milwaukee as far as offseason grades go. Next, we have the Chicago Bulls. They were the 60 last year, finished with a 46-36 record. They lost to Milwaukee in the first round in 5 games, and it honestly should have been a sweep. In the offseason, they re-signed Zach LaVine, 5 years, 215 mil. Derek Jones, they re-signed him for 2 years, 6.5. They brought in Dragic in free agency, 1 year, 2.9. They brought in Drummond at free agency, 2 years, 6.5. So they basically just took Brooklyn scraps. They drafted Dalen Terry, kid from Arizona, with the 18th pick. I like him. They're not going to have Troy Brown or Tristan Thompson anymore. Not too big of a losses. Things to monitor, though, is the Lonzo knee injury. That's first for me. Looks like he had a bit of a setback as far as recovery goes, and he's not going to be ready to start the season. I mean, it was some scary quotes where he was talking about how he couldn't go up his stairs. He can't even run or jump. Like, that's just not what you want to hear from a guy that young, that was that good for them defensively. And to talk about his impact defensively, when he was on the court last year, the Bulls were allowing almost 9 less points per 100 possessions with him on the floor versus him off the floor. And then you have him and Caruso together, which was just a menacing backcourt. And that's when Chicago was really just humming on both sides of the ball, with Lonzo leading the break and LaVine and DeRozan playing off of him. It all went bad once he got injured. But with him and Caruso, that backcourt together, they were forcing turnovers on 17.4 possessions for opposing teams. That's per cleaning the glass. And that was top of the league. So This is a guy who's going to be very much missed, especially on the defensive end. Um, and yeah, I mean, it just sucks, just from a fan standpoint. It's been fun to sort of follow his career and see him grow into the player that he's become on both sides of the ball. And, the fact that he's having to deal with this injury kind of sucks. Another thing I'm watching out for is Vucevic's 3-point percentage. That has just dramatically dropped. This guy was at once flirting with 40% in Orlando to now being under 30%. And if you're the Magic, that trade just looks so much better now, especially considering the situation that they're in. And we'll get to them later. But yeah, I'm going to be interested. It's going to be interesting to see if Vooch can kind of get back to his old self and find a place in this offense. Because last year, it was just a lot of times where he was just another guy on the court. And that's not what they traded for. With the Lonzo injury and, not really bringing in anybody that moves the needle, I got to give Chicago probably a C plus, honestly. I think it's going to be a rough season for them. And I don't know. We'll see. I could be wrong, but I don't think it was a great offseason for the Bulls. Next, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers. Definitely not the case with them. They last year finished with the 9th seed. They had a 44-38 record. And honestly, had Jared Allen not got injured, they probably were going to be like a top 5 seed. Like JB Bickerstaff, he has done a hell of a job with them. Garland's development has been amazing. They ended up losing to Brooklyn in the play-in, but I mean, this team has a lot of promise. And of course, we have to start with the biggest move probably of the offseason, which was them trading for Donovan Mitchell. In that trade, they gave away 3 unprotected firsts, 2 pick swaps, as well as Colin Sexton and Lauri Markkanen. And I just love that trade for them. I love that he fits their timeline. I love that it gives them another ball handler next to Garland. Speaking of Garland, they extended him 5-year, $193 million. They re-signed Ricky Rubio, who will probably be ready sometime during the first half of the season. He's back on a 3-year deal at 18.4 mil. Just a solid backup point guard. Raul Neto, they brought in free agency, 1 year, 2.4 mil. Another guy who just, you know what you're going to get from him. He's going to give you good minutes when asked upon. They drafted Isaiah Mobley, which is sort of like the Giannis thing. Let's just draft our potentially best guy's brother just to keep him happy. So I like that. They let go of Rondo, but you replace that with Neto and Rubio. I don't think you lose too much as far as that goes. Things to monitor for Cleveland. For me, it's the usage for Garland and Mitchell. So Mitchell's usage rate in Utah the past 5 seasons, starting from his rookie year, it was 29%, 32%, 33%, 35%, 35%. So it's gone up each year, which you expect with him getting better and just the sort of, archetype player that he is, just a ball dominant kind of guard. So that doesn't really surprise me. And Garland last year was at 31.3%, which was a career high for him. So I'm gonna be watching out for how those two sort of balance the, just handling the rock, who's gonna have the ball in their hands most of the time. I expect it to be Garland just because he might be a better playmaker. But again, this is just a good luxury to have because now you have Mitchell who can, give you just as much of a, just at the point of attack, that's just another guy you have who's just so explosive, so dynamic. So, having both those guys, it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of get adjusted to each other, but I think they'll figure it out. It's a lot of good vibes there. It seems like they're happy to be with each other. Another thing I'm watching out for is the Evan Mobley leap. I mean, this guy just, the sky is the ceiling for him. He's already shown signs of Defensive Player of the Year potential last year. Offensively, we'll see how he develops, but definitely excited to see him in year 2. And another thing I'm going to monitor with this team, and this might sort of make or break, it might just sort of dictate how far they go into the playoffs, is who closes at the 3. So they have Isaac Okoro, they have Karis LeVert, they have the rookie, I'm blanking on his name, that they drafted. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. There was another rookie besides Mobley that they drafted. I just forgot his name. But it's going to be interesting to see who Bickerstaff goes with at the 3 because that's sort of like the missing piece for them. Like if they have a solid 3, this team is just like with that backcourt of Allen and Mobley and the 2 guards of Mitchell and Garland, if you put in a solid 3 that can guard for you and knock down shots, which Okoro can guard for you, but he can't knock down shots. And with Levert, he can knock down shots, but he can't play defense. So it's like, they're probably it's gonna have to be a revolving door between those two. But maybe there's a trade in the season that they can make. I don't know. Maybe the rookie that they drafted, he, pops and he's able to close for them. And it's gonna be interesting to see who's going to be the solid three for them in the closing lineup. So that's something I'm going to watch out for the Cavs. But I love their offseason. I love the Mitchell trade. I love everything they've done. The re-signings, the signings, the extensions, it's all great. I'm going to give the Cavs an A, honestly. They get a solid A for their offseason report card or whatever you want to call it. So I think that's the highest grade I've given out so far. And I haven't given out too much A's, and they're one of them. So really good offseason for the Cavs. We can move on to the Detroit Pistons. Last year, they were the 14th seed. They finished 23-59. In this offseason, they drafted Jaden Ivey with the 5th pick and Jalen Duran with the 13th pick. Both guys that they really love. Both guys I think are going to play, Ivey especially. They traded for Alex Burks. He has 2 years left on his deal at 20.4 mil. So it's, it doesn't kill you as far as salary cap goes. They traded for Bojan, however you pronounce that. They got him from the Jazz. He has 1 year, 19.3 left. They signed Kemba Walker, or at least they got him on a trade with the Knicks. I think they reconstructed his deal for 1 year, just straight up 9 mil. And then they let go of Jeremy Grant. He went to Portland. Olenek went to Utah, as well as Frank Jackson and Saban Lee. Things to monitor for Detroit. Year 2 leap for Cade. Last season, this is per Cleaning the Glass. He assisted on 28.2% of his teammates' shots, and that was in the top 15 of guys. And that translates to elite playmaking ability, which is what you're getting with Cade, and which is why I think the future is really bright for Detroit. We'll see how Ivy pans out. I think he's going to be really good, but he's a rookie. We have to see it first. But you have an elite playmaker like Cade and a guy who can play off the ball like Ivy. They kind of got their own little situation similar to Cleveland with these two guards that are just really dynamic in their own way. So that's going to be fun to watch. And then Marvin Bagley, this is just the last chance for him, I think. I know he's probably not even 26 yet, but I mean, if it's not gonna come together in Detroit, I don't know when it's gonna come together for that guy. So those are two things I'm gonna watch out for this season for Detroit. They're gonna be a fun league pass team, especially just watching these two guards, wreak havoc on defensive backcourts. As far as grades go, I like what they did in the draft, so I'm gonna give them a B plus. Yeah, I'm gonna give them a B plus. I think a B plus is fair because they didn't do nothing too crazy as far as free agency goes or trading, but I really like the draft for them. Getting Ivy at 5 might be one of the best steals in the draft, so I think a B plus is solid for Detroit. They're gonna be fun this year. I wouldn't even rule out the play-in for them. Next, we have the Indiana Pacers. They were the 13th seed. They finished with a 25-57 record. This offseason, they drafted Benedict Mathurin with the 6th pick. He's a dark horse rookie of the year candidate. They traded Malcolm Brogdon to Boston for Daniel Theis, Aaron Nesmith. Good luck with that. And a 23 first-round draft pick. So, just another draft pick that you can stash. They re-signed Jalen Smith on a 3-year deal, 15 mil. I like him. They let go of TJ Warren and Dwayne Washington. Things to watch out for this season is the Tyrese and Benedict backcourt. Man, it's just a lot of fun young backcourts in the East now that I'm thinking about it. And some stats here for Tyrese that I wanted to throw at y'all. Of pick and roll ball handlers that played a minimum of 25 games and had at least 5 possessions per game as the primary ball handler in pick and roll situations. Halliburton was 10th in points per possession at basically 1 point per possession, which was first. And before that, the season before that, when defenses switched on the pick and roll, he was first in the league as well at 1.2 points per possession per second spectrum. So that just tells you right away that this guy is really special with the ball in his hands. And I still don't understand why Sacramento traded him, especially because he wanted to stay there. And when do you ever have a guy that wants to stay in Sacramento? But Indiana has a good, cornerstone with him and Benedict. They're probably going to tank. I have tank for Victor sweepstakes and the things to monitor for them because they're not going to win a lot of games. And when are you going to trade Miles Turner and Buddy Hield? I think they're just waiting for the right opportunity. They probably haven't liked what they've heard so far. I know Westbrook's name has been tied into, Indiana and those two guys. I don't know if that's enough for the Pacers, even with the two picks, but we'll see if Miles Turner and Buddy Hield are still on the team come Christmas time. But Indiana, I mean, nothing too crazy. Drafting Benedict was nice, but I'll give them like a B minus. I think they're more so in tank mode. I guess if you look at it from the point that they're trying to tank, they probably did well, but it's just not a guarantee, especially with how they changed the rules with just being capped at a 14% chance of winning the lottery. Tanking isn't as incentivized as it once was, so I can't really reward them for just having not that great of an offseason. So I think a B minus is fair for them. I think Benedict's going to be good though. I like him. Next, we have the Southeast Division, and this will wrap up the Eastern Conference. So first in this division, we have the Miami Heat. They were the first seed last year with a 53-29 record. They lost to Boston in the Eastern Conference Finals in 7 games. In the offseason, they extended Tyler Herro to a 4-year, $130 million deal. They re-signed Caleb Martin, who I really like, at 3 years, $20.4 million. They re-signed Dwayne Dedmon, 2 years, $9 million. They drafted Nikola Jovic with the 27th pick. I mean, whenever Denver and Miami play each other, that's just going to be a nightmare trying to, especially if those guys are guarding each other, Jokic and Jovic. I mean, I can't imagine how you even try to, say a sentence involving those two guys. But they like him. He's shown the ability to stretch the floor in the preseason. I think he just finished high school, which is just nuts. But they lose PJ Tucker and Markieff Morris, which was, I mean, losing PJ Tucker is tough because this guy really was playing a lot for them. He was basically at times the guy they used to guard the other team's best player. This guy was a menace on the offensive rebound. I mean, PJ Tucker brings a lot of valuable things to a team. So losing him, I think they're going to feel that a little bit. They were 4th in defensive rating last year, which is pretty good. That might drop off a little, but we'll see. Hero and Bam were 2nd and 3rd in usage rates last year per cleaning the glass. So we'll see if that goes up, if Spoelstra sort of leans into them more, especially with Hero getting his new contract. I'm just curious as to see like what they're gonna what the plan is for him on the team as far as like his role. Like, is he going to be a guy that they want handling the ball when Kyle Lowry isn't on the floor, or when you want to play or have Jimmy off the ball, or is he going to be more of a Klay Thompson type where it's just, sort of just float around the perimeter and just spot up? I think that might actually be better for him, but we'll see how they use Tyler Herro. That's something I'm also monitoring. I didn't have written down. Another thing I have written down as far as what I'm going to watch out for with the Heat is Kyle Lowry washed, or was last year sort of a blimp? I mean, he's north of 33 now, and that has a lot of mileage on him. He's taking a lot of hits. He did not look good in the playoffs last year, and he was dealing with personal issues, and he missed some time, so you have to factor in that. But I mean, that's tough. They gave up some valuable pieces, including Precious, which I discussed earlier when going over Toronto, for Kyle Lowry. So, you're kind of hoping for him to bounce back this season. And then Hero and Bam, next developments, I mentioned that. As far as grades go, I'm gonna have to give them like a C plus, to be honest, because they didn't really. I don't even think they got better, to be honest. You lose PJ Tucker, you lose Markieff Morris. You keep some guys that I like in Caleb Martin and Dedmon, and obviously the Hero extension, but that's not jumping off the sheet for me. So I'm gonna give them a C plus for the grade. Next, we have the Charlotte Hornets, who finished 10th in the East with a 43-39 record. They lost to Atlanta in the play-in. They got blown out yet again in the play-in, back-to-back seasons. Nice little ritual for Charlotte. In the offseason, they drafted Mark Williams with the 15th pick. They re-signed Cody Martin, 4-year, $31 million. Shout out to him because he was balling last year for them. Farewell to Miles Bridges, probably from the league, depending on how that situation plays out. And Montrezl Harrell, who is now in Philly. I forgot to mention that with Philly. They have Harrell now, who that's another reason why Philly had a pretty, I think I gave them an A minus. They, it's just another guy who can play for you. Um, Things to monitor is obviously LaMelo's development, PJ Washington in a contract year, and this is another team along with Indiana and the Tank for Vic sweepstakes. Some stats for the Hornets that I have: LaMelo's effective field goal percentage jumped from 50.9 to 52.4 in year two. This is per cleaning the glass, and his 3-point percentage went up from 35% to 39%. So that's really encouraging if you're a Hornets fan. And as the pick and roll ball handler on a minimum of 7 possessions per game, LaMelo scored on 0.8 points per possession, which was in the top 25. And I expect that to go up. Those stats are per second spectrum. So LaMelo had a really good rookie year, and he had an even better sophomore year. So I just like the trajectory that he's on right now. And I mean, who knows? They're probably going to be bad this year because there's just not a lot of talent on this team. But if Vic happens to fall on their lap and you have Victor Wembanyama and LaMelo Ball just running up and down the court, I mean, that we might be looking at the Nets Magic and Kareem. Who knows? Who knows? I mean, that's just a thought I had. Like that could be really fun. But Hornets, it wasn't really a great offseason for y'all. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to give you guys a C, solid C. Wasn't terrible, but probably got worse. You lose Bridges, so it's going to be a lot of scrambling trying to fill his production and what he brings to the floor. Because I mean, he was basically their second best player last year. That's not an easy guy to lose. So I'm gonna have to give Charlotte a C. And that wraps up. No, yes, no, we have two more teams left in the Southeast Division. We have our Washington Wizards. I thought that was the end, but it's not. The Wizards were the 12th seed last year. They had a 35-47 record. In the offseason, they re-signed Bradley Beal to a 5-year, $251 million extension. They traded for Will Barton, who has a year left on his deal at 14 mil, and Monty Morris, who has 2 years left on his deal at basically 19 mil. And in that trade, they sent out Ish Smith and KCP. They drafted Johnny Davis, the kid from Wisconsin, with the 10th pick. I think he's going to play for them. They signed Taj Gibson in free agency at 2.9 mil on a 1-year deal, and they let go of Raul Neto and Thomas Bryant. Things to monitor for the Wizards. There's another team that's going to be in the tank for Vic sweepstakes. I don't know if this team is going to be very good, especially defensively, but I think they will be sneaky good offensively. They have guys like Corey Crispert, who shot 62.3% field goal for effective field goal percentage post All-Star break. That's per second spectrum. That's really, really good considering he's a rookie. Rui, his shot improved last year once he came back. A stat that was interesting to me though was Porzingis taking a career high 46% of shots in the paint per second spectrum. And that tells you, or that's sort of what we were all waiting for with Porzingis. It's like, man, like we get it, you can stretch the floor, but you're 7'2". Like, why aren't you in the paint more? And I think last year was sort of the first year we really saw him, maybe since New York, where he was just a force in the paint and really, causing some damage down there. So you like to see that from Porzingis. Like they have a lot of guys who can low-key score offensively, and you have the shooting with Bradley Beal surrounding that, surrounding him with that amount of shooting and his drivability, which he's one of the best in the game at. I think they're gonna score a lot of points. Kuzma was great for them. He's just really found a home here with the Wizards. So I think they're gonna be good offensively. Defensively, there's question marks, which is why I don't think they're gonna be a great team, but I'm gonna give them a B minus for off-season grade goes, because Will Barton and Monty Morris, I think that's an upgrade from Ish Smith and KCP. I like Johnny Davis, and Bradley Beal looks like he's happy to stay in Washington. Porzingis and him, we get a full season of them. That's going to be interesting to watch. And I think a B minus is fair for the Wizards. Next, we have the Orlando Magic. They were the 15th seed last year. Last in the conference, they finished with a 22-60 record. And in the offseason, they obviously drafted Paolo Banchero with the first overall pick. They re-signed Mo Bamba to a 2-year deal worth 20.6 mil. He's looked really good going back to the second half of last year. They signed Bol Bol in free agency at 4.4 mil on a 2-year deal. They re-signed Gary Harris. I would pay attention to that as a trade piece maybe down the line, but they brought him back on a 2-year deal at 26 mil. And they let go of Robin Lopez. Things to monitor for the Magic. It's gonna be health for me. Health of Jonathan Isaac. I mean, this guy's been injured since I was in high school, basically. Markel Fultz, he's been in and out, but when he played last year, he was pretty good for them, especially in the second half of the year. Franz Wagner Leap is another thing I'm looking out for. He was really good last year, especially defensively. So it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, overall, the Magic were actually really good defensively. They were 7th in defensive rating last year post All-Star break, and that's because guys like Franz were flying around, and Wendell Carter Jr. and Gary Harris, Mo Bamba. Like they have a lot of guys similar to Toronto. There's a bunch of tall, lanky guys that can disrupt passing lanes, alter shots at the rim, and that it makes sense that they were 7th in defensive rating last year post All-Star break when you see the type of guys that they're putting out on the court. I'm also going to be interested to see Paolo as the main initiator of the offense. I think he's going to fit in perfectly for them on the defensive side because he just fits the mold of, size, switchability, length, being able to disrupt offenses. But him on offense is going to be interesting to see. Like, I think they're really going into the season with the idea of him just being the point guard, basically. We'll see if him and Markel sort of balance those duties, but I think Paul's gonna have the ball in his hands a lot. So it's gonna be fun to see what he does with that. I mentioned Gary Harris as a possible trade candidate, and then the Wendell Carter trade Jr. just looking even better for them. Here's some fun stats for y'all. Well, first we'll throw a Franz Wagner stat. The Magic were plus 6.5 points per possession when he was on the court per cleaning the glass. And that just, again, just reiterates how good he was as a rookie. This is a really cool stat. Mo Bamba and Wendell Carter Jr. were both top 20 in something that they call D LeBron, which was created by the Basketball Index. And this is defensive impact per 100 possessions. And both those guys were in the top 20. So you see that, and then you see that they were 7th in defensive rating. And, it kind of makes sense that Orlando was pretty good post All-Star break. So I think they're going to be pretty good this season. There's, I wouldn't rule out a play-in, them possibly getting into the plan. Maybe that's not the best road for them. You probably want to be bad again, just considering that they, who's involved in this draft. And, maybe they're just not ready yet, but oh, they got some guys. They're gonna be fun to watch. I'm gonna enjoy watching Magic games this year. So as far as off-season grades go, I will give them I'm gonna give them an A minus, honestly. I like the Paulo pick. I like the guys that they kept and the guys that they already have. They're just, very young team, full of life, full of energy. Gonna be fun to watch on those random Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. So I'm gonna give them an A minus for the offseason grade. I think they did pretty good in that office. Next, we have the Atlanta Hawks, and this will wrap up the Eastern Conference. They were an 8th seed last year with a 43-39 record. They lost to Miami in the first round in 5 games. And the offseason, this was another major move that happened, but they traded for DeJounte Murray. In that trade, they gave away the 2023 first-round pick that belonged to the Hornets, which is top 16 protected. They also gave away the 2025 and 2027 first-round pick, which are unprotected, as well as a pick swap in 2026. I mean, they gave up a lot for DeJounte Murray. I'm not going to lie. And I get it. Like, this is a guy who's really good. He's really young. He's on a good contract, and, you want to continue to surround Trey with as much talent as possible, but that's a lot for DeJounte Murray, to be honest. We'll see how it plays out. Maybe they're really good this year, but that is a lot on the surface. They drafted AJ Griffin, the kid from Duke, with the 16th pick. They also traded with Sacramento to get Justin Holiday, who's on a 1-year, $6.3 million deal. I think it's probably going to be between him and AJ Griffin battling for minutes. Frank Kaminsky, they signed in free agency, 1 year, 2.4 mil. He probably fills in the Gallinari hole that was left. And they bid a farewell to Gorgie Jang, Kevin Herter, which is just sad to see. DeLon Wright, Gallinari, and Lou Will. Things to monitor is DeJounte Murray's fit with Trae Young. That's the first thing I'm going to be watching out for, obviously, I'm sure as everyone else will, especially in Atlanta. And another thing I had was DeAndre Hunter and Onyeka Okongwu's leap. Those are two young guys that they have that are really special defensively. You want to see what they're capable of offensively, but if they're able to take another step, that just makes them that much better. Some stats for the Hawks. Trae Young shot 37% on pull-up threes, which was second behind Curry. That's per second spectrum. He averaged 10 points per game on drives on a minimum of 15 drives per game. Basically, he's just a walking offense. Let me clean up those stats. He was 10th as far as drives at 10 points per game, and he was third as far as 24 points accounted for off assists, which was third in the league. So Trae Young, elite playmaker. We already knew that, but the stats just, solidify that. So you add those two guys, that's going to be a lot of creation. I don't know if they have the shooting to surround that, but we'll see. It's going to be good to see Trae off the ball more. I think that's going to be refreshing for Atlanta Hawks fans, just seeing how much he had to be on the ball. So you bring in DeJounte Murray and seeing him off the ball, sort of, in a Steph Curry role where he's just roaming around off picks. I want to see that more from Trae, and I think bringing in DeJounte Murray allows that for them. So yeah, we're gonna see how that fit goes for them. I think it's going to be well. I still think they gave up a lot for him, if you're asking me. And because I think it's a lot, I'm gonna give them an offseason grade of a B. I know that might sound kind of low because a lot of people are really high on the trade, but I don't know. I just don't know how much, how seamless this fit is gonna be. I don't think it's gonna be as seamless as the Garland and Mitchell fit. Or I could be wrong. Again, this is just projections, but that wraps up the Eastern Conference. I'm gonna end this because we're gonna make this a separate video. We're gonna have the West, and I'm already previewing the West there. But yeah, that wraps it up. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll be back for the Western Conference.